Will come to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Iannarino.
Here.
Hunt.
Here.
Khan.
Here.
Smolka.
Here.
Shupai.
Here.
Wong.
Here.
Ader.
Here. The mission of School District 15 is to produce world-class learners by building a connected learning community. Real quick, I'd like to make a formal congratulations to Sam and the Ader family, and welcome Jane Eliza to our D15 family. It's exciting to have a new baby.
She's an honorary member of the Equity Committee. She was on our call the other day. She was cooing in the background. It was amazing.
Yes, she has made lots of appearances in D15 virtual calls over the last week and a half. So, thank you very much, though. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. We're happy to have you back and glad everybody's doing great. I would also like to once again recognize our wonderful staff across the school district that has made possible the in-person learning and now back to remote learning for a little bit, and we know that you're jumping through incredible hoops to keep this going. Also, thank you to our parents who have committed so much of themselves to make sure that their children are successful with the current learning model. We appreciate you greatly and look forward to doing everything that we can to help the kids be successful. And finally, I'd like to take a few moments to recognize a very special community volunteer who passed away unexpectedly on November 28th. Dave Seifert served on the CCSD 15 Board of Education from 2011 till 2017. Dave was a guy with a huge smile, a really easy, big, fun laugh, and just a super great guy to speak with. I'd like to share with everybody a very memorable conversation that Dave and I had, which to me demonstrates very much what Dave was about. Time period was about late 2016, and Dave and I were catching up after a Palatine Friend basketball game, which took place at Friend, and I'm pretty sure that Palatine won that game, so he was in his glory. At that time, I asked him if he was planning on running for another term on the Board of Education, as he was coming to the end of his second term. And he told me flat out, nope, I'm not planning on that. And went on to say that he would have loved to do another term, but his son Luke was just hitting high school, and his daughter Grace was halfway through. And Dave was a guy that was always super involved with his children, as well as the community. And he told me that he wanted to spend more time with his kids while he still could. He knew that high school went so quickly those first couple of years for Grace, and was anticipating the end of it would be fast for her too, and then the 4 years for Luke would go so quickly. And wanted to have some time to really experience the success and fun that high school is for both of his kids. And so he decided not to run. And looking at it today, thank goodness that Dave had the foresight to make that decision and grab up the years and the time with his kids while he could. Needless to say, Dave will be missed by many of us in our community. And I'd like to have everyone take a moment of silence in Dave's memory.
Lisa, could I just say a couple words? Just because it did hit me quite hard because I did serve on the board with him for a few years. I just wanted to say that, he really, I thought about it as much as I could to try to encapsulate what type of person he was. Kind of the epitome of Palatine and District 15. The old school Palatine, District 15, just the volunteerism from the PTA, from supplying his ice cream to all the PTA events, and just being so, like you said, a jolly personality and so welcoming. And when I came on this board, he was the guy that, he actually sat right there, and he was very welcoming, kind of show me the ropes type of person, and he will be very missed by this whole community. So.
Thank you, Zubir.
Thank you.
Again, if we would just have a moment of silence in Dave Seifert's memory. Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. We've got students, not in person, but
Something
students.
special today, yeah.
So if everyone would please stand.
Okay, everybody, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everybody? Hold up your sign, Adam. Proud to be 15.
Nicely done. Public comments. We will now open our meeting for public comment. Please remember that this is not a dialogue between you and the board. If you have a specific issue which requires a response, Superintendent Hines will get back to you. State your name and identify any group that you represent. Limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. There is nobody here, so I don't anticipate we're going to have public comments in the room, but does Morgan have something to share?
I don't think so.
I don't believe she has
No?
anything. She's on Zoom, so
Okay.
she would have told me if she did.
So I'm not going to finish the public comments since, of course, nobody on staff is going to make public comments today. But Morgan Delac has been kind enough to commit to keeping an eye on not only the Zoom, but also the comments that are made on the Facebook Live stream, and she will try to respond to people while we're going, as we want to make sure that good information is out there. We've noticed there's been a lot of misinformation that has been pushed out through that venue, so we want to make sure that everybody is a recipient of good factual information. So Morgan will be on that. We will also, I will jump on when the meeting is done and I get home also. If there's anything I can add to the conversation, I will do that as I have the last few meetings too. So if you have a question, please feel free to throw it into the Facebook Live comments. All right, Dr. Hines,
Okay,
the floor is yours.
thank you. Just some high-level updates for the month of December. Special education, the department that is new to Ann Scully, she said, we realized today she's entering her 6th month, so the halfway point. We are moving forward with our CEC audit, albeit at a little bit of a slower pace due to COVID. But we have had, we completed our focus groups in which our parents were able to participate if they had a student with a 504 or an IEP. The crew from CEC did a random sampling of our IEPs. They looked at our paperwork, how we write our present levels of performance, how we set and measure goals. They'll give us any feedback that might improve our IEP process. They did have a meeting with the SIP staff, and that's one of the programs that they're really going to focus in on. That's one of our larger programs at Marion Jordan, where we made some shifts to this year. Special education will be doing a board presentation later this spring that will include the findings and any work that Ann has worked with her team on throughout the year. We were set to do in-school visits at the junior high because we are prioritizing SIP and junior high at the beginning of this process. We have pushed those in-school observations to January and February due to the adaptive pause that we're on based on the advisory and holiday gatherings and travel. The team is also working on both risk and threat assessments. There are signs of suicide protocols and professional development, as well as working to develop both with the educational team and parents a student safety plan that will really allow us to help students that are in crisis or have experienced a crisis with a safety plan that will help them move through whatever that crisis or trauma is. So very much a lot of work happening in special education. A few other highlights: finance and facilities. You will hear part of the update at this meeting in terms of RSP and the work that we're doing in partnership with them. At our next board meeting, you will hear Diana McCluskey provide the board with her 5-year forecast, and some of the work within the 5-year forecast has to do with capacity and the facility work that we're doing. Jim Kaplanis is still moving through our 20 schools and doing a room-by-room assessment. That data is then being fed to RSP, and it is really going to help further inform recommendations that we're going to make in terms of our boundaries and capacity work. We have begun to partner with our local police departments to do physical safety assessments around the exteriors of our buildings to make sure that we have the proper lighting, proper camera positionings, proper number of cameras. Do we have exterior doors that are marked and locked? So they're going through a physical security assessment for us, and we'll bring presenting those findings to the Board of Education at some point throughout the course of this year. We will also then determine if we need to allocate any funds to make our facilities, even safer than we feel as though they currently are, since we've now gotten to the vestibule point with all of our facilities. Is there anything else that we need to do in terms of layered security? And as we talked to the board about briefly today, we have a warehouse project going on. We are really digging into our warehouses. We're weeding through them. We're reorganizing them, and we hope to hire somebody that will both help supervise custodial maintenance, but really become the leader in a warehouse. In a district of this size, there are millions and millions of dollars worth of materials and assets in the warehouse and both of our facilities, one at CLA and one on Raleigh. We just want to make sure that we have a tight process, so that all of that work is underway with finance and facilities. The multilingual program has been busy. Per the Illinois State Board of Education, we have to administer access assessments to over 3,000 students in person. So they are putting together safety protocols and schedules to get staff and students in to move through the language proficiency test that is access, that will help determine if children stay in receiving EL support or if they're able to exit the program. So that is a large initiative with over 3,000 children that need to be assessed in person. So we will be putting that work. Wheels are already in motion with Renee and her department. We had a wonderful virtual dance party that I feel as though we need to probably try to find a snippet of for maybe the next board meeting when she presents an update either in January or February about the literacy initiative that she has. It was just absolutely outstanding. We had a virtual dance party with hundreds of families and children that participated. She had another is scheduling another BPAC meeting for the 17th, and that is a very active group of parents. We have always a strong turnout, so that is on the books for next week. Lesson studies are underway for the new curriculum, where they are focusing on interactive read-alouds that are run in a very similar model to our Fontes and Pinnell literacy curriculum for our general education students in kindergarten through 6th grade. You will hear a lot about that when she presents an update to the Board of Education. And the English language development, or ELD, coaching is continuing at the junior high. So again, another very busy department. Colleen Mullins, who's here with us today, and she has a rec in for purchase. She's spearheading the junior high literacy launch after about 20 years with the same literacy resource. So they're over the moon excited, as is she, as am I, that our junior high teachers are really engaged with new literacy curriculum. And at some point, just the way she did with Fontes and Pinnell, whether it's at the in the winter or in the spring, maybe towards the end of the year when they have a few months under their belt, she will be presenting an update to the Board of Education in terms of what that curriculum is shaping up to look like, both in reading and in writing workshop. A few other dates. Winter break is just right around the corner, a week from Friday. We will be closed from the 21st of December to after the New Year. January 4th is a teacher plan day, so teachers are in session, kids are not, and we intend to be back here January 5th. We will talk in just a moment about COVID and those plans, and then our January board meeting is on the 13th. Those are some of the happenings other than COVID here in the district. Any questions before I turn it over to Morgan? And I believe Karen Floor is on the call.
She is.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can. Yes.
Okay, great. So this is Morgan Delac, for those of you that maybe can't see my face. I am the Chief Communication Officer for those watching, and Karen Floor, our nursing coordinator, is with me today. Last month, we had the opportunity to hear from Sherry Stadler, And today we have Karen with us. So I would like to just walk through some of the COVID updates that we have since our last meeting. The first being some guidance changes that we've seen from the IDPH since November. We know that guidance is frequently changing, as we've said throughout this whole process with COVID. This one is pretty significant. This is quarantine for people who are asymptomatic, and they have decided to shorten that window in some instances for people who either obtain a negative test result or are continuing to be asymptomatic after the 10th day. So Karen had an opportunity to be on a call with the IDPH today to learn more about this, since it is so brand new. So Karen, could you share a bit more about what you learned today?
Absolutely. So I was able to sit in on a call from the IDPH to the local health departments, and this is rolling out soon. It is not officially adapted by the IDPH at this point, but they are saying that we can reduce the quarantine period if someone is exposed and asymptomatic to 10 days, and that only it has a 1 to 10% risk for transmission by shortening it by those 4 days. That would be without testing. One of the other things that they are talking about is shortening the quarantine to 7 days. But there are a few caveats with that. One is that they must be tested between the 5th and the 6th day with a PCR test. If that test comes back negative, they are then released from quarantine after 7 days, but no earlier. And that is a up to 12% risk of transmission by doing it at 7 days. They were saying that this is not fully adapted yet in Illinois, and that they are still reviewing it, and we should be looking for updates coming soon.
So as Karen said, this is not in place yet, but it is something that we will keep our community updated as when it does become in effect, and what it means for our students and our staff members. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about our community metrics. So Julie, if you could advance one slide for me. This is in parentheses, you'll see what the metrics were for each zip code last month when we presented to the board. And in red, you'll see those numbers as they are as of last night. So you can see that overall, the metrics in the community have gone down since November. This is actually the opposite of what we all anticipated, including what the governor and the health departments anticipated. We all thought that the Thanksgiving time would happen with travel and gatherings, which would drive up our numbers around this time, which is about 2 weeks past Thanksgiving. And thankfully, we have not seen that. We have seen a slight uptick in those numbers in recent days, but we did not see the surge that we anticipated seeing overall. And Karen and I spoke about this earlier. Karen, can you share what you feel we can attribute that to?
So many of the news agencies and have been warned, have been telling people about not gathering, and I believe this is due to people following the guidelines that were laid out by the governor and by the health department to limit numbers of family members that are gathering. So because we were able to social distance and maintain our, the protocols we put in place, we were able to keep our numbers lower than we anticipated.
So they're still above what we saw when we first started school, but they are lower than last meeting. They are lower than we anticipated. So overall, with everything considered, it's relatively good news. So let's move on to the next slide. So internal metrics, we were in session for 2 months before taking our pause. So we're very fortunate to have a lot of data at hand related to in-school transmission and out-of-school transmission, both because we are keeping track of reported cases to us. That's only those that parents or staff members choose to let us know about, of course, but also through contact tracing, we're able to identify more and more where people likely developed the disease in the first place. So this slide we found interesting because we were able to track the last 2 weeks that we were in school in person and compare that to the 2 weeks of the adaptive pause period in terms of staff cases. Students are not reporting cases to us necessarily during this pause period, while some are, because people are virtual right now. parents are not always contacting the school when there's a positive case just because that child is not entering the building. They don't feel all the time that we need to know that. Staff, on the other hand, are still coming into the buildings sometimes, so we are able to know if they're positive or not. What's interesting is what we noticed is without children in the buildings and without many of our staff members in the buildings, we still have an equal number of positive staff cases as we did when school was fully open the 2 weeks prior. So, but not being an epidemiologist or a doctor, and Karen has more medical knowledge than I do, of course, but when you look at this on paper, you can infer that this is just letting us know that schools being closed do not reduce the number of our staff members testing positive, and more likely than not, as we've also learned from contact tracing, people are getting the virus from someplace other than school.
Yes, and Morgan, we are still contact tracing. So our nurses are still in contact with families that call to let us know if there are any positive COVID cases, and we're also following up with staff at this point.
Great. So the dashboard looks a little bit different during the adaptive pause period. It's still updated once per day, Monday through Friday, but as I mentioned, it's only reflecting new positive cases for staff members. It does not show quarantine for staff members because there's so much virtual work happening right now. So we took that out because it wasn't as relevant as it is when school is open. And of course, we're not showing positive student cases because we don't have students in our buildings at this time. So just for anyone who's checking the dashboard, I wanted to provide that update. We will go back to our normal protocols again when school reopens. So as we mentioned in November, we do have a saliva self-administered test for our staff members to use when they become symptomatic. We decided to partner with a company called Ambry to offer this to our staff members to give them a more convenient option to get tested, because it is difficult to obtain a test right now, and it's sometimes a lengthy process to get those results. So because staffing is such a critical aspect of keeping our schools open, we wanted to make sure our own staff could return to work as quickly as possible if they did develop symptoms and were ruled out as having a positive case. And if they did become positive, we wanted to be able to contact trace quickly and effectively and isolate those people who may have been in close contact. So we've had some success so far. The staff feedback has been it's convenient and easy to use. There have been some instances where some error happened, but that does happen with a self-administered test. There's more room for error than if a healthcare professional is doing it for you. We have been able to identify some positive cases through the testing, and excuse me, I noticed my own typo on the screen there, my apologies. So we know that it's working. There are positive cases coming through on it. And we are getting some questions from our own staff because they like it so much, is can we expand this to family members of staff, which is something that's come up many times, because if anyone in a household is sick, it still inhibits that staff member from coming to work until the sick household member gets a test result. So it's something to consider for sure, but it does make it more complicated for us to monitor and to, of course, pay for as a district if we're going to be expanding that. Not as many people are taking advantage of the test as we thought. Maybe it's because we're not having as many sick staff members, which would be great, but we are significantly under budget on this aspect of staff testing, which is a good thing for our bottom line. So moving forward, school does resume for us on Tuesday, January 5th, and we do intend to reopen on that date at this time. We are asking all students who travel during the winter break period to consider quarantine of 14 days before returning to in-person learning. We know this is a difficult choice to make because in-person learning is, if you've chosen that route, it would be sometimes sacrificed if you did not come back. But in order to safeguard our community and allow for our buildings to reopen on this date, we are going to ask that people do this. Concurrent learning will be available to students through January 15th, which is close to 2 weeks after the opening date. So if you do travel, you will have an opportunity to participate in live instruction should you need to do that quarantine period that we're asking of people. So for staff, of course, we do have the saliva test I just mentioned, And we're asking those who have symptoms or known exposure to the virus to take that test before coming back so we can quickly identify them as being hopefully negative and able to return. The turnaround time for these tests is, generally speaking, between 36 and 48 hours, so it's pretty quick. And if a staff member is traveling or considered a close contact and maybe becomes symptomatic, we're asking that they take some of their paid time off or work with their principal or other administrator to determine the best route, because as we know, we do need people to come back to school in order to reopen. So we can't extend the same concurrent learning opportunity to all of our teaching staff if we have people back in person in those classrooms. So vaccine planning, this is a common question that's coming up. Karen knows quite a bit more about this than me, so I'm going to let her talk about the vaccines.
So in the IDPH meeting that I was in today, they talked about the vaccine rollout. And at this point, they have not received any vaccines. They're not certain which vaccine they'll be receiving. What we do know is that they will come through the Department of Public Health. We also know that it will most likely be beginning this month, not certain. And they're recommending the groups that start would be the healthcare. They did list education likely in phase 1, part B. So phase 1, part A is the healthcare workers. Phase 1, part B could include education, but because they're waiting to see what kind of vaccines roll out and what's available, they will likely change what groups will be in phase 1 and phase 2. The timeline is still under discussion. It is a 2-dose vaccine, regardless of what vaccine it is, and the vaccines are given 21 to 28 days apart. That's it, Morgan.
All right, so just one last slide, and this is, we touched on this at the last meeting. There's not been many changes to this, but we do have a lot of students who've requested in-person learning to start again after the winter break period. So as we mentioned, nearly all those changes are going to be granted, and Dr. Kowalczyk and her team have really done a lot of work to make sure that was something that we could accommodate. So parents who have not already been communicated with about the status of their request will be notified by December 15th if their request can be granted or not. So those again go into effect on Tuesday, January 5th. And that is our COVID update.
Thank you, Morgan. And Karen, do you have any questions for board? Any questions for either Morgan or Karen?
Nope.
All right, thank you for joining us, Karen.
Thanks for the update. It was a great update.
I don't necessarily have a question for Morgan or Karen, but I just wanted to know, and has a survey been sent out to the teaching staff and asked whether or not they were going to take the vaccine? Because I'm assuming this is a voluntary.
Oh, it's absolutely voluntary. We can't force anybody to take a vaccination. We have not thought to survey the staff.
Okay.
Something we could consider. Yeah. But it's absolutely voluntary. As a student, immunization outside of COVID. So yeah, but we can. I meet with Scott Wildman and Ann Bridges every Tuesday. So we could certainly talk about whether or not it's worth putting a survey out there.
Okay.
I'm curious to see where we'll fall as educators
Right.
in that hierarchy of what you're seeing as first responders, EMTs, doctors, nurses, police, fire. I'm anxious to see nursing home, residents. Where are they going to slot educators? So it'll be curious to see where we fall in that order. Okay, information reports. We have, Diana, you can come on up, and we have our friends from RSP here virtually. Morgan, I know I saw Rob a little while
So Rob
ago.
is here. He is on the Zoom right now, so
Okay.
he's getting ready.
I'm here. My video doesn't seem to want to start.
There it is.
There it
you are.
goes. Hello.
as we have done each month, we bring you an update in terms of our work on our capacity study, work that's been going on for a number of months now. We've made a lot, I would say, over the last few months, a lot of forward progress that Rob will talk to us kind of at a higher level tonight. We're going to do a much more detailed presentation to the Board of Ed in January because Jim Kaplanis, our Director of Facilities and Operations, is still doing his portion of it. He's, each day he hits another few schools. But we wanted to provide the board and community kind of with an update from last meeting to now and just keeping on our monthly cycle of updates. So you know that we haven't lost sight of this project. It is a very high priority, but it is just very, very complex. And each time we think we take a few steps forward, we realize that we need to, dig a little more deeply in another area. So definitely on the front burner. Turn it over to Rob and Diana to get you up to speed on where we've been and then the next steps over the course of the next 3 months, what we intend to do. All right, Rob, it's all yours.
Awesome. Well, this slide here really illustrates some of the higher points of what we're trying to get addressed in this next phase. The first bullet point really gets into we're in the process of updating your enrollment analysis. That's important because with COVID, we have some different things that have happened with your enrollment. And so one of the things that's part of what we're looking at would be what we call the instructional modality. So choices have been made on the learning experience kids have, and we now are seeing what those returns are. And through the Midwest, other districts we're working on in your area, we're trying to put what we would call the recovery of students back into the system. So that's part of the enrollment projections. That'll be an important piece. The second bullet point is I believe there's some new development that's being proposed in your area that could bring new residential opportunities. And so that's going to impact potentially what your enrollment is. So that's important to factor in. The third area gets into the educational programming locations. So this goes back to what Jim is doing. And I think this has been really an incredible learning experience for your team in understanding as we talk about things like removing the overlay district for bilingual students and looking at the component of where special education programs are or where they may need to be, or how we align attendance boundaries with the 3 high schools. Those have an impact on what we can do with where students live and where the facilities are. So as we get that information, and Jim's been in regular contact with us to help us understand where they are and how we can be thinking about some of those aspects to creating those different plans that we're looking at. The next bullet point with STR, as we work our way through things, maybe there's the need for additions, or maybe there's more conversation that we've already had in the past about the new elementary building or how programming may need to take place in the middle schools. There may be some costs that are associated with some of those aspects of one of the plans that we would be looking to move forward for the board to consider. Really in that last bullet point, the functional capacity, that is so critical, and I can't say enough thanks to Jim for taking the lead on this to try to make sure that we really know where all the programs are and how, as we make these changes, will we be able to be successful for the teachers and for the students that'll be in those buildings. I think that kind of covers my 100,000-foot view. As Lori indicated, there's a lot of things that are happening under the water, much like a duck. Looks like things are smooth on top, but there's a lot of people that things are moving around to try to put all the right data sets in place. So you guys have a really good plan.
So I would say relative to bullet 3, we spent a lot of time, both bullet 3 and 4, that functional capacity that Jim is doing. He's around 25% done. We're really kind of pushing to try to have it to be 100% for the February board meeting. That's our target. February, I would say at the very latest, it would be March. COVID and some hiring that we're doing has slowed us down a little bit, but we're still really doggedly determined to hit that February dynamic. But then the other piece of it too is, and Rob, you mentioned something, and it just, I want to make sure the board hears it, is we're really trying to get this right. So, right, we're going to have that feeder, we're going to try to address the community values that are high, but we really also, in terms of our EL, we want to make sure that our programs are in the right place, that our kids are in their home schools to the greatest extent that they can be, that the special education programs are evenly kind of fanned out, if you will, to represent east side, west side. Because what's happened, we're uncovering, is that programs have wound up in schools where there was greater capacity. So they may be clumped in one area, which again means kids are traveling for longer distances to get to a school where a variety of different special education programs are housed. And again, they're housed where they are, oftentimes based on capacity, versus having that equitable access across the district in logical locations. So one of the things that we're doing now is we've identified where we think those programs should be, and now we're really digging into, would we have the capacity to place the programs at the schools where we'd like them to be? And if not, then something we'll bring to the board is, for example, we may need to add 2 rooms to Willow Bend. And Willow Bend, this is an example. This is not even real. But we might, if we needed to put them there, might we need a few classrooms at Willow Bend? And what would the associated costs be? Versus, let's keep them where they are, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense from a programmatic or an equitable access standpoint. So that is something that we're really digging deeply into. Renee has worked with Tom Bramley, who, Rob will say, and Jim will say, knows the district like the back of his hand, down to the street, how many kids, from how many households. We really want to make sure that if we're moving kids or boundaries or little portions of a neighborhood, that it makes sense, that we're not moving them if we don't have to. So we're really digging into right now the student level, very, very, very granular. So that takes time, and then we have to think about matriculation. How old are the kids? How many years are they going to be with us? There's families out there that we haven't yet identified that are ours. So there's some level of ambiguity, but we're really digging into every last possible scenario before we somewhat finalize our findings that were in recommendations that we'll bring to the board for sign off before we then start pushing them out to the community for feedback. So again, February's board meeting, maybe March, will be our target to have all of this work complete. So anything to add, Diana, or on behalf of Jim, who I know you work with almost every day on this?
No, I think you said, you described it very well. Jim is very focused on, this is going to be a data-driven, decision, what the scenario is at the end that, we think is the best to bring to the board. It's taking a lot of time. It's a deep dive, and I just say he's really working very hard. I think it'd be a good opportunity for him to also speak to you at a future one of the presentations. But I think Lori and Rob summed it up really well. We're at right now, and it's coming. It's making progress every day, every week. Very much on the forefront, but there are layers, and when he'll bring it up,
and
I'm like,
the analogy is a good one.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. He'll bring up these other considerations once you keep diving deep into it.
And I think it's important for the board and the community to know that Lisa and Frank, who were very involved at the Boundary Task Force level when it started, and potentially even in the community before you were on the board, you remain with us when we have our Zoom meetings. At our last meeting, 2 members from the Boundary Task Force, Jen and Brian Lucas and Jen DeFranco, they continue to hang with us and push our thinking. They share information that we maybe have lost sight of or we didn't know. And Brian, for example, started to notice that we were moving one little area, and if we didn't move that area, they could stay here. And so they're really kind of getting deeply, into the data with us and helping continue to push our thinking to make sure that we're making all the right decisions and that we're going more deeply where we need to, or we're pivoting if we need to, if we're heading down a wrong path. So I very much appreciate Jen and Brian still hanging with us, and Lisa and Frank giving up more time, from your workday to join our calls to help us make sure that when we get to that recommendation level, people are going to be very happy with what we're proposing, and they'll see that what we see, that we're really situating the district for decades and decades to come to be able to deliver, you know, not only a high level of education, programs and services, but to do all those other things, community schools, a consistent feeder pattern, things that so many other districts take for granted that we don't have. You know, it's our goal to make sure that we deliver. So.
I do think it's worth repeating. This is a huge project. There's a ton of time and effort that's being put into it. You guys, once again, are working diligently in an amazing manner in order to make it happen. For the community, as Lori indicated, but I'm not sure if it was very clear out there, the expectation is by February or March, we will have 2 or 3 plans that are viable options. And the expectation is those 2 or 3 plans will be presented in a board meeting, and following that, there will be an opportunity for community engagement, community feedback. We understand full well, as Lori said, you know, pulling Brian and Jen back in and making sure that some of the areas that were vetted already get brought back on the table are very important, and we certainly know and understand that there will be other things that the community will bring up when they see the potential plans, and may find some holes in the things that are out there. So we're still in the early stages of the process. This is by no means close to done.
And if there wasn't a worldwide pandemic, you know, we might be a little further, but we're not. We're very focused on it, but there have been a few other things that have pulled us somewhat away from this.
And I'd like just to add that the information we did see in the last meeting actually looked very promising. It looked like things were actually, you know, starting to fall into place, which is good because it's, like I said, it's a huge undertaking. There's so many moving parts. It almost seems like like it's such a monumental task to get these things all to fit together. And it looked like it was actually, you know, starting to come together and look very positive. So I was very happy to see that.
Thank you. One request, could we get this slide into the online packet?
Yes, indeed. We can update it. Thank you. And then any other questions, thoughts, feedback, things we don't want to lose track of for our next meetings between this board meeting and the next? Anything on your mind, hearing from anybody out in the community? Okay. So each month we'll just do more and more. Rob will come back. Be a little more detailed presentation in January. Again, Jim will be a lot farther with his capacity piece, and hopefully it'll be done in February. So we're getting there. All right. Thank you, Rob. Happy holidays.
Yep.
Thanks for coming in
Thank
today.
you. The same, Rex. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
We have a motion for the reading and acceptance of minutes, please.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the following meeting of the Board of Education, November 11, 2020, regular Board of Education meeting and closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board reports. Frank, Ed Reddick.
Okay, legislature's not in session, so there's nothing too much there. I know there was a meeting with the CISPOs for all the community districts with some of the legislatures. I think Lori actually has some stuff to talk about there. So besides that, that's about it.
Diana and I were both on that call, and you know, we heard from different legislators from different districts, and you know, some of the big questions are, will there be any stimulus funding? What impact will COVID have with the progressive property tax? The progressive property tax not passing, what implications is that going to have in terms of school budgets? Will evidence-based funding continue in its whole harmless state? Can we count on the money that we've been getting, or will that be reduced and then prorated, starting with the neediest schools so they can stay whole, and then schools that are very well funded, like a North Shore, Winnetka, or Wilmette, maybe they would go after some of their funding, even though they probably don't get that much funding. But that was a big topic of discussion. And to Frank's point, the legislature was not in session, so we don't necessarily know, but all eyes and ears are on state and federal sources of revenue. I know, Diana, again, you were on that call if you want to. I'm sorry, I should have told you I was going to piggyback on Frank's update.
No, and I didn't bring my notes, but I think one thing that, of course, I was listening very closely to was the EBF. They're gonna try to fund it, I think, for tier 1 and tier 2 at the same level as this year. So that so it didn't mean that they were gonna come up with that new money. But if, I would be, okay, happy, please, don't cut the funding. So I think that was my big major takeaway. The other things I think is they were looking for other potential, to everybody's chagrin, ways to tax, new, not like a sales tax, but I don't know, maybe taxes on services. So they're exploring, the legislature is exploring ways to increase revenues by some new forms of taxes.
It'd be great if they looked at ways to cut spending.
Yeah.
In the same way as they look at ways to increase tax revenues.
Right.
But this is the state of Illinois, so
Yes.
I'll take that back.
Take that into consideration.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I do.
All right, happier topics, Mike, 1-5 Foundation.
Yeah, so just real briefly, holiday tribute cards are going on right now. I think there's a couple days left to get them out there to honor a staff member or teacher. Your $10 fee goes to benefit the 1-5 Foundation. Just wanted to say thanks to Morgan Delac and Sandy Kramer for all their hard work in getting all of those out. If you haven't had a chance to honor somebody, I think we have till the 13th to get it done. So get those in, and obviously this year is a great year to honor any staff member or teacher that you feel is deserving, as they all are deserving this year.
Okay, anybody have anything to add to 1-5? Lori?
No, Mike, you did a great job. That's the big thing that we have going on right now. It's difficult to figure out how to fundraise when there's not a lot of places that are open. So we are wondering what will become of our 21st century learning, targets. We may have to push that out. I think we have our money for our blessings in the backpack, which provides food, which is certainly, of more critical importance than our 21st century spaces. But that's really the update right now. We're in a bit of a holding pattern with 21st century. But the holiday cards are a great way to help during a pandemic, raise money and show appreciation. So if you haven't done so, please do.
Finance Committee?
No updates.
Equity Committee, Zubair, Sandy.
We met earlier this week as a group. We focused on discussing the common pitfalls in school districts' equity work, so doing some learning before we dive into our process, which we are moving forward with. Our process to assess our current state of equity in D15 using the Alliance for Resource Equity's 10 Dimensions framework. The assessment will dive into each dimension and focus on learning what success really looks like in each dimension, and then also evaluating what the dimension currently looks like in D15 and what we want it to ultimately look like in the future, which again, as we've said in the past, will help inform our strategic planning process as a board later next year.
Yep, it'll probably start next fall.
Yep. Anything that you would add, Lori, again?
No, I think it's funny. We chuckled. We read the article about common pitfalls, and we're like, oh, we've done a couple of those. So we really dug into that article first before we started down the road of hyper-focusing on one or two of the dimensions to then bring forward to the Board of Education. And we really, again, just to reinforce, this is a learning year for the committee. And then I think the next big thing we need to determine, and we talked just briefly about this before we jumped off our call the other day, is this is a board equity committee, so we want to make sure that there's an understanding of what the board committee work would be, and then what like a superintendent's committee might be, and then how we're probably going to have some commonality in which we're going to work towards, but then there might be tasks that are different. So we have to spend some time. So at the next meeting, I will get the committee up to speed on the criteria as identified by the Illinois Association of School Boards in terms of what board committees, could and should work on. And then we do have board policy about superintendent committees and a number of them. So I'll leave some of that work in, and then we'll I think that's going to help narrow or focus, maybe not narrow, but focus our work at this level, while still allowing, the staff that are going to be working closely with equity to do their portion.
Yeah. Anything, Dan?
I have nothing to add. I wasn't at the meeting, unfortunately.
No, baby ate her.
Yeah,
She took
I was a lot busier than her, so.
He tapped out, she
that's why
subbed
I
it.
just- I'll play by the new mother, great.
She made cuter sounds than you do.
Yeah.
Fair.
You don't think my sounds are cute? Come on.
All right, may I have a motion to approve the personnel report, please?
Make a motion to approve the December 9th, 2020 personnel report as recommended.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino,
Aye.
Motion carries. Ooh,
Aye.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Ooh, do we get one then? Hunt.
Oh, I thought I said Hunt.
Yeah, you did,
Yeah.
but I already said motion carries.
Oh, sorry.
I was jumping all over you, Julie.
That's okay.
All right, motion does carry. Motion for authorization of the tax levy.
I make a motion to approve the certificate of compliance with truth in taxation law, resolution authorizing reduction of certain fund levies for the 2020 levy year, resolution authorizing final aggregate tax levy for the year 2020, and the certificate of tax levy for 2020 as presented.
Second.
Discussion?
Second.
Discussion? We do not have it together today.
I was a little delayed there.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 9.3, motion please.
Make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 official school calendar as presented.
Second.
Discussion? I have one question on that, and I know Lisa, but maybe somebody knows. The start date for both years appears to be a week later than it was this past year and last year. Did 211 move their, are we still matched up with 211 start date?
We start a little bit later than 211. Starting last year, we moved to the week of like August 15th or thereabouts. So we're tracking about 3 or 4 days, later than they are.
Okay.
And quite honestly, we would love to start even a week later, but we don't want to do that to our families because this schedule, if you recall, everything started to move in Illinois because they were trying to get high schoolers to be able to take their exams prior to winter break. So while it's a very valid reason at the high school, it's not necessarily as critical at the elementary. So what we've tried to do is keep it within a week of their start. But our big holidays for families, Thanksgiving, the winter break, spring break are the same. So because we know for gatherings and travel that would be critical. So this year we started the 15th, 16th, and then last year as well. So that's kind of going to be our rhythm, probably around the middle of August, that we're going to target. We're going to use a couple days at the beginning of the week to do our 2 institutes, and then have kids in for a shorter week, which just getting them reacclimated after a summer. Feedback from staff has been that's just about the right amount of time to get the summer cobwebs out of the brains and get everybody rolling, and then have that next week be, a full week of school in August. So the other thing that I have had a superintendent communication council and parents as partners over the last 2 weeks. So a question that has been asked in both of those meetings is what's going to happen with the snow days, the days that are built into the calendar. And we'll now that we're especially 1-to-1 and we're an e-learning district by force because of COVID. We discussed it at cabinet that we think we're going to leave the days in the calendar because sometimes we might have a school, if there's a rolling power outage or something or that we've had to close for a particular reason, we want to have some days built in at the end. But again, if they're there and we don't need them, we won't use them. So what I will need to, all superintendents that didn't initially have a district that became an e-learning district prior to the pandemic, we have to find out from the ROE if we need to write a new plan to formally be an e-learning district. And if that's the case, then we will write that plan, and then we can determine if we need to have snow days anymore. Or if we're just going to, whether for snow or inclement weather, we're just going to resort, to e-learning. The issue will be, if we do that, then kids are going to need, kids of all ages, 5 to 13, are going to need to bring their devices back and forth to school. And, that is something that's a little hard for a kindergartner. Chromebooks are pretty big and a little heavy for a younger learner. So we have a little bit of thinking and investigating to do. Days will stay here now. We will certainly advertise by the time school begins next year, our intention, whether we will use snow days during inclement weather or whether we'll revert to e-learning. But I at least wanted you to know that that's a discussion point that we're investigating. So they will remain in the calendar because we don't always have to call school just for weather. There could be another form of an emergency. Okay. So this calendar is for approval, and then the one for 22-23, which is the first time you'll see it, we'll bring it around this time next year for approval. It tracks very, very similarly to this calendar. And the one you're looking at to hopefully approve tonight tracks very similar to the calendar that we're using now. I don't see any reason in which we would, really deviate too much from this structure. It seems to work for staff and community.
All right. Roll call.
Shupai.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Ader.
Aye.
Anarino.
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
So that's you. Sorry.
Motion carries. Item 9.5, motion please.
Make a motion to appoint Joshua Chute as the director's new IMRF authorizing agent as of 12/9/20 as recommended.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
I'm sorry, just a note that we only approved the 21-22, not the 22-23.
We skipped 9.4.
Oh.
I mean, we can vote on this and go back. I just wanted to let you know.
All right. Well, we'll do 9.4 after 9.5.
Ader.
Aye.
Anarino.
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 9.4, motion please.
I make a motion to approve the proposed 2022-2023 official school calendar as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Wong.
Aye.
Ader.
Aye.
Anarino.
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye. Motion carries. Item 9.6.
Make a motion to purchase the comprehensive research-based program for Spanish reading intervention titled Soluciones and published by Benchmark Education Company, New Rochelle, New York, as requested. The total cost of the materials will be $43,672.50. The title funds will be used to make this purchase.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Anarino.
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Ader.
Aye.
Motion carries. Motion for 9.7, please.
Make a motion to approve the purchase of junior high resources and materials for reading workshop from Heinemann Publishing in the amount of $88,298.13 to be paid from the district literacy budget as requested.
Second.
Discussion. Anybody have any questions for Colleen? All right. Roll call.
Hunt.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Ader.
Aye.
Anarino.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 9.8.
I make a motion to award the contract for 2020 winter break CLA asbestos abatement to Eller Technologies Incorporated, Bolingbrook, Illinois, for a total amount of $44,900 as recommended.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Khan,
Aye.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino,
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Motion carries. Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent calendar? If not, may I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Smolka,
Aye.
Shupai,
Aye.
Wong,
Aye.
Ader,
Aye.
Anarino,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Motion carries. Dr. Hines, correspondence?
Yes, just like every month, we have a steady flow of FOIAs. Min says usually around one a day. They're included for your perusal, and if you have any questions, feel free to, about any of the FOIA requests we've received, let me know.
I had a question about the staff survey, the teacher survey.
Mhm.
There was a FOIA that was in there requesting the survey, and then a secondary response from Min inclusive of an additional question. Was the request for just the questions or the results of the survey also?
I believe they asked for the questions. They wanted to know what was surveyed. I don't recall if they wanted to know the findings. Do you usually?
So it was a rather general
Yes.
request, and what our practice is to interpret it in the most restrictive way.
Okay.
And so that's why, without an additional request specifically for results, it was interpreted as the survey. She asked for the survey.
Yeah,
So-
yeah,
A
copy
that
of
was
the
how I read
survey.
it too.
Correct.
And
That
it
was sent.
made sense, the answer, but I was thinking if I would have asked that, I would have asked for the results, not just the questions, but.
Correct. And she still can come back, but for right now, we usually interpret it restrictive to what they have specifically asked for, which was the survey.
Makes sense. All right. Any other questions? And may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.